Be a free thinker and don't accept everything you hear as truth. Be critical and evaluate what you believe in. Aristotle. Now, prior to 2020, at least in the Western world, you would have been very hard pressed to find anyone from any political stripe that would have disagreed with this statement. Regardless of whether they agreed with their neighbor or not, or the person across the political aisle from them about this topic or that topic, they all would have held sacred the idea of thinking for yourself, not just accepting what you're told, and making your own way based on decisions you believe are best for your life. This was a value that was bipartisan in North America until 2020. But something has happened. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are probably tired of me using quotes from the series Colony, but this series could have been really described as a psychological thriller more so than a sci-fi show. This is, of course, the actress Sarah Wayne Caius playing the character Katie Bowman. There's absolutely nothing bad about thinking for yourself. She says this to her young children after she finds out they've been being brainwashed by a nanny that was charged with taking care of them. You continue the quote, as an adult, though, at some point you have to make a decision. You see, the idea is you see information, you look at it for yourself, and you come to a conclusion, and you make choices based on that conclusion, and then if that doesn't work out, you go back and maybe look at the information again, you make a different decision. But one thing is always true, no matter what. Perception is reality. The first decision you made didn't work out the way that you wanted. Well, you perceived the question or the issue incorrectly. And it's okay to go back and make that change. This happens as we get older and our perspectives change. Depending on 90 degrees of perception and the color of the light, a rectangular orange or round and blue. It just depends on how you look at it. The series should have won a lot more awards than it did, because there's something going on right now in the real world over in India that was highlighted in this series if you watched it closely. And I'm just going to go over this for a couple minutes, then we will get to what's happening in India. They have totally reversed course on something, and it's sent those reporting on the story into a state that they can't really deal with, because they thought something that happened was good news was bad news, and if they hadn't done it, it was bad news that would have been, they can't figure it out because it's all psychology. Now in the series, this particular character has their family. They've been separated from one of the children, and they're working to try to get back together, everybody together. Of course, the aliens have come down and they've dropped the walls, and inadvertently, one of the kids was caught on the wrong side of the wall. But they're still trying to make the best of what's happening for their family. Of course, this guy goes, he makes a decision all by himself, kind of as a cowboy, and puts her in a bad position and puts his family at risk, trying to do the right thing. This is the idea of looking at all the information and then making a choice. And then the results of that, you have a whole new set of choices. He got himself locked up and he put her in a bad position. So now she has choices. And then, of course, they eventually figure out the problem is they're not communicating, and they begin working together. And that fixes a lot of the issue. Which leads to another quote that happened later in the series. Even the most successful men make 2 or 3 critical mistakes in their lives. It's what they do afterward that defines them. You see, in the afterwards part, the entire paradigm has changed because of the bad decision. Now, most times, and I can speak for myself here, guys, maybe you can back me up on this, that when we make bad decisions, usually there's more emotion involved than thought. You know, we don't always make great decisions without emotion, but most of the time when you see bad decisions, you can find some aspect of emotion that got involved that shouldn't have been there. Now, other side of the page, the Sarah Wayne Caius character, this is her sister in the show. She makes a series of decisions that in the show they kind of couch as bad, even though it's meant to take care of her kid. But the psychology was different. You see, she was making decisions that people would think, oh man, that's kind of rough. Why would you do this? Why would you do that? Well, the same thing was happening with her brother-in-law. He made decisions and he was trying to do the right thing, but they ended up bad, so she had to make other ones. Now, we covered this in the last video. We talked about how with the shortages going on with baby formula, you're going to see young mothers and those who have little babies in their families, grandmothers and grandfathers and brothers-in-law and all this, they're going to start make decisions differently because they're not going to watch the youngest members of their family go hungry. Now, here's where things are going to get a little bit weird. In the series, she ends up choosing to be with this guy because the aliens have determined that he is a super valuable guy and he's worthy of any medicine that he would want. And she, by herself as a single mom, the aliens have determined that she's not. So, in essence, she's using him to help keep her son alive. Now, people would look at that on its face. Perception. Remember, perception is reality. And they would say, this is bad. This is terrible. This shouldn't happen. But one level in, but I understand. But I understand. Now, here's the crazy part. These two individuals, after having played this role for 3 years, ended up in real life living happily ever after. Wait a minute, what? I thought we were talking about sci-fi. No, well, we were. We were talking about sci-fi. We were talking about a TV show. Never underestimate the power of psychology. They were just playing a role for a TV show. But in the process, they were both at this time married to other people. And there was this thing that happened, this chemistry, and they are now still together. 57 and 39. 57 and 39. Huge age difference. Especially out on the West Coast. That's kind of a, not seen, it's not as accepted as it is in Florida. That big of an age difference, but never underestimate the power of psychology and the power of the mind. That they just played a role for a certain amount of time, and it ended up affecting them in real life. Because, of course, acting involves emotion. You can't just pretend. Because eventually the emotions that you allow to come to the surface will affect your judgment. And that's why I always counsel people to stay in their thinking brains when doing things like prepping or making political decisions or decisions about their life going forward, and stay away from the emotions. Now, what are the stories from India? This is a story from March. War creates an opportunity for Indian wheat growers. What? Well, because of the war in Ukraine, tightening supply and rising prices for grain from major exporting countries have made Indian wheat competitive. See the price of wheat going up, all of a sudden, here's a new player on the field. In a world where people are worrying more than ever about food shortages and rising inflation, India's warehouses are brimming over with grain, and the country's farmers are gearing up for yet another record harvest. The country is the top global producer of wheat after China. The country is the top global producer of wheat after China. Notice it doesn't say top global exporter. It says top global producer of wheat after China, and has the potential to ship 12 million tons to the world market in the 2022-2023 year, the most on record according to the median of 5 estimates, Bloomberg, blah, 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 compares with shipments of 8.5 in the U.S. So people are like, wow, India's coming to the rescue. Wow, this is great. This is proof positive that capitalism works, and when we let the markets make the decisions, then we'll be able to fix things and everything will be great. Prices of farm commodities were already on a tear before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, as drought shriveled global harvests and demand increased, helping send world food costs to the highest on record. The war made matters even worse because it has choked shipments from one of the planet's top producing regions, cutting off more than a quarter of the world's wheat supplies. India wheat exports helped market in a tight world supply situation. Now, this is all what? All supposedly good news, right? Now, this is March. This is March 29, 2022. Fast forward. India bans wheat exports, cites food security and soaring prices. Wait, what? They were just all excited and happy about being able to access these export markets, and they were going to make a ton of money, and everybody... And now they're banning it. Why? Well, it's real simple. Because it got so expensive, and there were people out there making a ton of money, they could make more money selling grain to the Western world, wheat to the Western world, than they could feeding their own people. Their own people were starving. And they were shipping food overseas. And India stepped in. The government said, no, absolutely not. India has banned, 14 May 2022, banned exports of wheat effective immediately, citing a risk to food security, partly due to the war in Ukraine, as a scorching heat wave curtailed output and domestic price hit a record high. Now, listen to this. Same reporting agency, although not one of the world's top wheat exporters, as opposed to one of the top producers, India's ban could drive global prices to new peaks given already tight supply, hitting poor consumers in Asia and Africa particularly hard. Ag ministers from the G7 condemned India on Saturday if everyone starts to impose export restrictions or to close markets that would worsen the crisis. We call on India to assume its responsibility as a G20 member. Government officials in Delhi said on Saturday India would still allow exports backed by already issued letters of credit and to countries that request supplies to meet their food security needs. We don't want, and here's the key, wheat trade to happen in an unregulated manner or hoarding to happen. You see, when things get expensive like that, all sorts of other players come in. See, now there's the story. Now, great story, Mickey. What does it have to do with us? India decided to make India great again. MIGA. India first. We should feed our own people first. And here's the key. Keep the cost down. Make it affordable for everyone first. Then we'll worry about the rest of the world. See, there was this story about some years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, people talking about the U.S. being self-sufficient when it came to petroleum. It was absolutely wrong. It was a total lie. Yes, we were. Under Trump, we were self-sufficient. No, we weren't. We were the world's #1 producer of oil at one time, absolutely. And ready for this? We were the #1 producer of oil, the #1 exporter of oil, and, hold on to your hats, sit down, the #1 importer of oil as well. Wait a minute, what? Yep, that's right. We were producing more than everybody, and we were selling one brand of it to other people around the world that would pay more for this and importing cheap from this other, and all of it was necessary. And still trying to strong-arm Venezuela for their oil. There was never a time where the U.S., with its oil supplies, was providing all of its own need, that it could shut off all imports of oil. That never happened. Look it up. There was never a point where the U.S. was ever anywhere near cutting off all imports of oil and providing for itself. And just like India with wheat, keeping the price of oil down. You see, you can't have everything all together, all in one world. Because to do that would require socialism like you've never seen it before. To say that the U.S. is now going to only use its own oil for its own needs, and it's also only going to allow it to get to a certain price, would completely push out the idea of capitalism. The only way that could ever happen is if the government took entire control pretty much of all the oil supply of North America. I'm not sure if Mexico and Canada and the U.S. combined could get that done. It's a very complicated thing, but this issue in India just highlighted it. They have this huge supply of wheat and a huge demand for wheat around the globe, making the price of wheat go up. But that hurts the people of India. And the people and the government of the people of India said, we're not going to allow this to hurt our own people. So as of right now, it doesn't matter how much money you can make shipping it here, there, and everywhere. We're banning all exports until the price comes down to a certain point where it doesn't hurt the people of India anymore. See, this is that head scratcher moment where the perception of a thing and the reality of a thing are in conflict. Just like, and this is why I use the series Colony. The perception of a thing and the reality of the thing are two totally different things. It just depends on your perspective. So never, never underestimate the power of this and how it can drive decisions, people to make wrong decisions, and people who are making right decisions will be perceived as having made the wrong one initially. So I'll leave that there. I'll let you guys talk about all this, but God bless. Like, share, subscribe. You guys have a great rest of your week, and we will see you guys next time.